My Hills Have Eyes, Creep. In 2008, I was driving from New Orleans, LA, to Eugene, Oregon. It was just me, a 22-year-old female, and my 1-year-old pit bull in a 14-feet U-Haul truck with everything I owned crammed into the back. A fancy flip phone and my printout of MapQuest directions. I think the first smartphones actually came out around that time, but I didn't have one. Cell phone service was also much spottier, and there were long stretches through the desert where I had zero service for hundreds of miles. I was driving a lonely stretch of highway through central Texas when I realized I hadn't seen a town or exit for a very long time, and my giant U-Haul was really low on gas. Just when I'm starting to freak out and seriously run out of gas, I see a small town coming up. I pull into this town, and it is tiny. I was so worried about other things that I never did pay attention to the name of the town. But there were only about 6 streets in the whole place. I go gas up and I'm ready to get back on road. Except I cannot, for the life of me, find my way back to the highway. I circle the town about 4 times and start getting so frustrated because this is such a tiny town. So how the heck can I not find my way out? I can literally see the highway, but can't get to it. I return to the gas station to ask for directions. Now, when I got gas, I paid at the pump and never went in. When I enter for directions, there's a skinny, nondescript guy who has black hair hanging down in front of his eyes that looks like it could use a good wash. He's not particularly creepy, but a little rude. He never really met my eyes. He was looking down at the magazine. He gives me directions that don't sound right at all. He's telling me to take a road that will get me to the highway in about 17 miles. For a moment I am dumbfounded. When I point out that I didn't drive that far to get from the highway into town, why so far to get back to the highway? I can literally see it from town. He's so casual, almost like I'm just an annoyance and can follow his directions or not. Why would he care? He gives me some explanation about the road curving around that doesn't really make sense. He still doesn't look at me, just whatever, I gave you your directions, and waved his hand in the direction of the door. When I got into the parking lot, my whole body started trembling violently, and my heart started racing, seemingly for no reason. I get into the truck, and as soon as I put the key into ignition, I burst into tears. I had the most terrible feeling that no matter how nonchalant he acted, this man had bad intentions. I didn't know what, but I knew right then and there that there was no way I was going to follow his directions. Yet this was the only store in this little town, and short of knocking on doors, no thank you, there was no one else to ask for directions. I decided I didn't give a crap if this town seemed like something dropped out of the Twilight Zone. I was going to drive around until I found my way out, even if it took all damn night. Then a big red beater of a pickup truck, as much rust as metal, pulls up and escorts the quintessential Texan man, huge, husky, in flannel and work boots. Without even thinking about it, I jumped out of the truck and approached him quickly yet worriedly. Looking into his eyes, I saw a kind human being, or at least I was hoping I did. I asked him if he could please give me directions to the highway. I told him I knew it was silly, but I just couldn't seem to find my way back. He looked concerned, as I was visibly upset, so he made me laugh, and very cheerfully gave me directions for a hairpin curve turn-off, right at the end of a small concrete tunnel I had passed several times. He said it often confused travelers because it was so hard to see, and they need to put up signs. With a sinking feeling in my stomach, I asked him how far in miles it was back to the highway. He laughed and gave me a funny look. "Miles, miss? I'd say it's a quarter mile at most. You can see the highway right from here." At this point I couldn't help it. I had to know. What happens if I drive? And I gave him the directions the man in the store had given me. Texan looked at me very intently and asked me how I knew about that route. It was quite far out, and usually only locals know about it, so I told him. He was quiet for a few minutes, and then asked what the attendant looked like and if I had a map of the state. No, just my MapQuest, which wasn't helpful in this situation. He goes to his truck and grabs a raggedy local map from his glove box. Spreading it out for me, he traces the route I described. The way the man from the gas station had told me to go led away from town, away from the interstate, and led to seemingly the middle of nowhere. Texan told me that the road did go about 17 miles, right before it dead-ended in the desert. I asked him what was out there, and he told me that it was nothing but some junked cars, a few trailers and mobile homes, all owned by the same family. This family was known locally as troublemakers, meth heads, and alcoholics, and these were the nice things townspeople had to say about them. And the erstwhile clerk was part of this family and lived down that road. I'll never forget the look in Texan's eye as he told me this. He also told me that I was smart to listen to my instincts, and he told me to be careful traveling out here. I don't know if the man from the gas station wanted what was in the back of my U-Haul or what was in the driver's seat, but thankfully I didn't have to find out. Oh, and I learned that sometimes angels look like ruddy-haired Texans with scruffy faces and rusty pickups. Thank you, random Texan stranger. You really saved my ass, and I will always remember you with tons of love. Sorry I didn't ask your name. You're forever Texan to me now. The creep in the blue coat. It was a warm Sunday evening in September 2018. I decided to take my son to a park to get some energy out before bed. This particular park has two sections. There's one section with a playground, swimming pool, and concession stand. Just past there it becomes thick woods and trails that run along a creek. It's a beautiful and popular during the day, but gets incredibly dark and hard to navigate once the sun starts to set. The pool and concession stand was closed, but the playground had a fair amount of people. Two girls around 13 to 15 start playing with my son. I'd had a long busy weekend and was glad for the break, so I sat down on a bench. That's when I noticed a man watching the three of them. He caught my attention because he seemed overdressed, wearing jeans, a blue coat with a hood up, and his hands in his pockets. No one else was wearing anything heavier than a hoodie. I was kind of unsettled by how closely he was watching the girls and my son, but figured he was just an overprotective father watching his daughter and her friend. Some time passes, and I start to reconsider if he's actually one of their fathers. They never look at him, and he would occasionally move behind a tree as he didn't want to be seen. Just to be safe, I decide to walk circles around the playground, keeping an eye on everyone. The sun sets, and people start to leave. The park is mostly empty, but I decide to stay to make sure the girls are okay. I feel like it's the least I can do after they kept my son entertained. A car pulls up, and one of the girls waves, says goodbye to her friend, and gets in. The other girl says goodbye to my son and starts walking away. She's going in the direction of the woods. However, there's also a bridge in that direction that crosses to a neighbourhood, so I figure she's headed that way. And that's when I notice the man in the coat following her about 20 feet behind. Something is very wrong here. She doesn't see him following her. He has his head down like he doesn't want to be seen, but he's definitely following her and beginning to close in. My mind goes to all the awful things that could happen if he gets her into those woods. I grab my son's hand and follow them. I have no idea what I'm going to do if my gut feeling is right. I'm a martial artist and a lot stronger than I look, but I know I don't stand a chance if he has a weapon. I get my phone, ready to call 911 if I need to. I catch up to both of them right as they approach the fork in the path. Just as I'm about to be forced to say something, a teenage boy appears off the bridge. He's young but taller and in better shape than the creepy guy. The girl runs to him and hugs him. He takes her hand and they walk towards the bridge together. I breathe a sigh of relief before my attention returns to the man. He's quickly turned around and is walking away quickly. I catch a glimpse of his face and he looks furious. He walks back towards the playground before disappearing into the trees. Once I can't see him anymore, I tell my son we're going to see how fast we can run to the car. We make it there in record time, and I immediately lock the doors. Once we get home, I obsessively check the news and neighborhood social media for the next couple of hours. Thankfully, there are no reports of any crimes or suspicious activity. I'm relieved but still bothered by what I saw. I just can't think of any good reason for a grown man to be secretly following a teenage girl. I even considered calling the police, but it's not like there's any crime to report. Just a creepy guy who I'm guessing is long gone by now. I comfort myself with knowing that all of us made it home safely that night. A few years later, I talked to one of my family members and mentioned this story. She told me that she remembered a woman being attacked in that park around the same time. I looked it up and sure enough, a woman jogging on the trails was kidnapped and abused right around the same time. He had done the same thing before. The good news is that he was arrested and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Creep in my neighbourhood. This story and everything written here is 100% the truth and did really happen to me in Arnold. This is a first-hand account of some truly messed up abuse that I experienced. And this happened when I was 11 years old, living in a lower middle class neighborhood. This occurred over approximately 6 months or so. I had naively put up posters offering babysitting services with my phone number on them. It was the early 90s. What can I say? I began getting phone calls from a man who identified himself as a doctor. Again, I was kind of sheltered and naive, so I believed him. He asked me some pretty basic health questions at first, but a few phone calls in, and he started asking more sexual questions. For example, if I hit puberty yet, or if I had gotten my first period. He asked the same about my older sisters. Then it progressed to him asking me to touch myself while on the phone with him. This happened several times. He was adamant that I didn't tell anyone about our calls. After a while, I was feeling very uneasy and was lying to him about if I had done what he asked. I think he could tell I was lying, and he seemed to be getting frustrated with me. One day, he called, and my older sister was there by the phone. I asked him to hold and try to get her to act like me so she could hear what kind of crap he was saying. She resisted, but I begged her. But when she finally took the phone, he had hung up. I think it was about a week later. I was walking alone around the neighborhood. I used to walk around it a few times a day, a few times a week. On this day, I was on my street, about 12 houses away from mine, when I noticed a car driving very slowly behind me. All I remember is it was a dark color and kind of old, and I didn't want to look very hard at it, so I didn't see the driver. I got a creepy feeling, so I picked up my pace. The car kept the pace with me, never passing me, always about 10 feet behind. I was panicking. I just wanted to get home, so I kept on walking faster and faster until I was at a jog. I finally reached my house and ran up to the door. Before opening it, I looked back and saw the car pull quickly into the next door neighbor's driveway and turn around. I never got another phone call after that and was never followed again, not to my knowledge. But looking back, I realized that I was probably very close to being kidnapped. I'm lucky he didn't try to grab me. Some backstory. In my area, there had been a series of missing and murdered young girls, and I think I might have been targeted by the same person. I never told my parents, but I wish I would have. How did he find me? This happened a couple of years ago, and while not the scariest situation, it was definitely creepy. I was on my way to work and decided to stop by the mall first to pick up some things I needed. As I was walking to my destination, I heard a voice behind me saying, "Hello, Megan, how are you?" I turned out, expecting to see someone I knew, but was surprised to see a tall man I've never seen before, smiling at me. He said, "Hey, Megan," again, and I sputtered a meek "hi" and kept walking. I thought maybe he said "ma'am," and I just misheard it, so I ignore it and keep walking to my destination. Once I get to the store, I notice he's still behind me and he enters the store with me. My gut is telling me this is not normal, but I try once more to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm looking through a rack of clothes when I look up and see him looking around the store as if he was looking for someone. I am 5'1", so I do well to hide in stores with racks and clothes, so I just grabbed what I wanted and walked to the front to pay. I looked up again and he was standing right there behind me and staring. The cashier and I shared awkward glances, and I paid and walked out with this man right on my tail. So I got fed up and turned to him and said, "What the hell do you want?" He then said, "You," and just walked away. So I walked to my car, the whole time looking over my shoulder to make sure he wasn't nearby. And once I was inside my car, I pull out my phone to call my dad, and I noticed I had a Facebook notification, which was a friend request from this stranger. I called my dad, who said to check my Bluetooth to see if it's on, and if it wasn't, because I never used it. I look out my car window and see this guy looking around the parking lot and looking in car windows. I tell my dad, and he tells me to just go, so I did. I blocked the guy on Facebook and haven't heard or seen him once again. I hope I never do. Creep in the black car. My roommate and I used to live in Virginia, about 20 minutes from her mom's apartment, and we used to dog sit for her all the time. One night, after we dropped the dogs off, we stopped at the ATM near our apartment so my roommate could deposit the money her mom had given her for watching the dogs. It was probably around 11 at night. As we were about to pull into our complex, she said, "That car is following us." I asked which car she meant, and she said to look behind us. Sure enough, there was a black car following us down the road. She turned on her turn signal, and so did the black car. I asked her how long he'd been there, and she said he'd been following us since we had left her mom's house. Not only was I freaked out, but I was thoroughly pissed. I yelled at her and demanding to know why she hadn't said something sooner, and she said she hadn't wanted to scare me. I asked her if he followed us through to the ATM, and she said he did. He pulled up behind us while she deposited money at the ATM and pulled through after us without depositing anything or stopping. After calling her an idiot for not telling me until we were home, I told her to turn right after the gate at our complex instead of left, because our apartment was one of the first on the end. It was bad enough that he knew what complex we were in. he didn't need to see which apartment we were in. She turned right, and I told her to floor it. We drove through the complex as fast as we could and lost him near the back of the complex. We parked across the street from our apartment, turned off the car, and crouched down low to see if he would drive by again. We didn't see him, but we also didn't feel safe. We ran inside as quickly as we could to grab some blankets and pillows, the can of pepper spray we had, and I grabbed my knife. We got back in the car, and I called my ex-boyfriend in a panic, asking him what we could do. My roommate said she would drive us to the movie theater she worked at, because it wouldn't close for a few hours and there would still be people in the parking lot. My ex kept asking me questions about the car that I couldn't answer, so I gave my roommate the phone. She described the car to the best of her ability and then stopped mid-sentence when we got onto the highway. He was following us again. My ex asked if she was certain it was the same car, and she said it had to be. She never saw the license plate, but she recognized the body and the headlights and the shape of the man who was driving it. She gave me back the phone and called her manager at work to tell him we were going to be coming by and what was going on. She managed to get a few cars ahead of the black car and got to the parking lot. She parked in the back before anyone else pulled in, but we didn't see the black car. One of her co-workers came outside and parked next to us to wait while my roommate called the cops. My ex promised we'd be okay and that he would have been there if he could, and that if anything else happened, to call him so he could talk to his surgeon about leaving for the weekend to check on us, as he's in the army and was on base a few hours away from us. The police said that since we didn't have the plate number, there was nothing they could do, but when we told them where we lived, they said there was going to be a few officers there on patrol that night anyway. Since we couldn't tell whether or not he'd followed us into the parking lot, they told us to just go home. We ended up sleeping in the car in a Walmart parking lot and didn't go home until the next night, and we never saw that black car again.